We have already looked into what primitive data types there are in JavaScript, as well as we looked into complex data types, such as objects. One of the big differences between the two is how JavaScript handles storing them and copying them. Primitive data types are assigned and copied by value. Let me show you what I mean. Let me declare a variable, maybe call it message, hello John, and then declare another variable, message2, and copy the value of the first one. So right now, these are two independent variables, and message2 has a copy of message. Changing either of them does not impact another one. And let me just demo that real quick. I'm gonna change message1 to be goodbye, and then I'm gonna log the 2. Let's refresh, see how this works. So I have goodbye and hello John. Goodbye is the value of the first variable, reassigned value of the first variable, and hello John is the copy before it was reassigned. And this is exactly what passing by value is. We're passing the value. We're just saving and copying the content of the original variable, not the variable itself. Objects in JavaScript have a different behavior. Variables that store them, they do not store the object itself, but rather they store the address in the memory to the object, or as we also call it, the link to the object. Let's see it. Let me declare another one, call it user, and user will have a name, maybe John Doe. Save this. So right now, the variable user is referencing the link to the memory where the object is stored. If I were to create another one and call it user2, assign user into it, it will copy not the object, but rather the link to the memory where it is. So essentially, these two variables, they will be referencing that same object in memory. And let me demo this. This is a very important concept. I'm gonna log the original user, actually its name, and then I will modify the name on the user2 to maybe Jane Doe. After that, I will log the first user again. And the reason why I do this is to demonstrate what passing by reference is. So right now, since these two variables are referencing the same object in memory, modifying the copy will actually impact the original one. Let's see this. Refresh. John Doe, this is the output before we modified the value. Now, notice how we modified the value of the name on the second object. And then we're logging the first one again. The value on the first one is updated too. That is because those two variables are pointing to the same object in memory, and modifying one will impact another one. This is a very important concept in JavaScript, and you have to always keep it in mind when writing your code or when writing complicated structures like this. Let's see how we can compare objects knowing this. Remember one of those popular interview questions about double equal sign and triple equal sign, where one takes the data type into consideration and other one doesn't? When it comes to objects, those comparisons work exactly the same. Two objects would be equal to each other only if they are the same object. So right now, if I were to log user1, or sorry, just user, is it equal user2? And the output will be true because these two variables are referencing the same object. If I were to create user3 and maybe have it as an empty object, or even if I were to have it as exactly same object with the same value, notice how these two look identical. If I were to compare them, they will be not equal to each other. So the first output is true, second false. Since those are two different objects, I create another one. Whereas in this case, I passed the link to the first object to the variable, and now they are the same object, they are equal to each other. Logical question that may arise is, how do we actually get a copy of an object, not the copy of a link? And in JavaScript, there are a couple ways to do it. In fact, it is a rare case when we do need a clone. Usually a link copy is enough. But to achieve this result, we could do a couple things. First, we could iterate over object and populate another empty object with all of the properties of the original one. And how about we just write a function to do it? Let's call it function object copy that will accept object to copy as a parameter, and it will return the copy. Let me create that. Copy would be an empty object, and I want to loop for key in object to copy and assign that value to the one we're going to return. Again, so what we're doing here, we are creating an empty object, then we are iterating over all keys of the object that we pass in the parameter, and we copy every value of that object into the copy and returning it. That's it. Pretty simple. So let's verify whether this works. Again, user name John Doe. Let user2 object copy of the user, and let's compare them. So now user and user2 will be two different objects that will have the same property name, and therefore they should not be equal to each other. So let's validate that fact. Object to copy is not defined. We're referencing the wrong variable name over here. Let's fix that. False, and indeed it should be false. Awesome. JavaScript also provides us with a shorthand for this. If we just do a call to object assign method, it will do this same operation for us. Let me show you how it works. I'll say user2 is equal to object.assign. And this function takes two parameters. First parameter will be an empty object that we're going to populate with values, with properties from the second object, the second parameter, user. So this essentially does exactly the same thing that we did over here. It will iterate over all keys of the user object, populate this one with those keys and values, and return it. Let's do that, and again log the comparison. It is still false. Those are still two different objects. Perfect. So that's all I got for this video. See you in the next one.